Yeah, that works. Yeah, that works. Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Joseph. Joseph, or am I ready to get going or? Hello, testing. All right. Thank you all. Good morning, everyone. I gave you all extra time to get some coffee, to chat a little bit. All right. Welcome in and bienvenidos to our Employee Professional Development Day. I feel like I'm at Wrigley Field. Batter up. We'll give it a second. Clearly, we are having technical issues.
So we wanted to provide opportunities for us to get through. Did all the buttons that I pushed before now just work? That's we'll get it figured out. And so that end of the day is really about you being able to choose what you need in terms of whether it's training time, whether it's getting into Workday or into different processes. And then we have one session that is specifically for faculty that are hoping to use faculty development funds and using that in Workday. So the day is really about trying to get us to think about the work that we do, as Dr. Garcia said, and to really engage in this, and then have some opportunities for more in-depth learning this afternoon. And some time to wrap up the day. So we hope this, at the end of the agenda, on the last of page 2, if you got a physical copy or you saw it in your email, there is a survey at the end of the day too that we'd just like to continue to get your feedback so that we can make these days valuable and meaningful for you throughout the year. So these all campus days. So I'm going to invite up our Pathways Day team to get us started. And we'll see. Is this the PowerPoint you need to be on? Okay, perfect. Good.
Hey everybody, so we had Pathways Day a little over a month ago. The reason for the day, to remind you, is a day for students to get inspired, consider options, make decisions about degree and career pathways, and to power up their future success. And there's a list of things that people reported in the session surveys about what they were getting out of each specific session. So you can get all of that information in there. Let's see here. Let's see which way it works. Or can I get to the next slide? Is there somebody who can help me with that? This way? Is there a keyboard maybe? Oh, other way. We got to go to the other way. There we go. So some numbers quick from the day. There were 788 attendees, which exceeded our expectations by about 5%, a little over 5%. So we felt very good about that. 778 people attended sessions based on the head count, so there's like some repeats in there, of course. Otherwise, that would be incredible turnout for those sorts of things. And we fed about 619 students. So I feel incredibly happy about the way that the day turned out. Can we go to the next slide? I don't know if all of you, but I also ate a bunch the next day as well. Aphrodite was a great choice. And I'm going to bring up Ed up here to talk about some of our exit survey results.
All right, so hi everyone. We used some surveys to get a little window into what students were getting out of this day. And I know for some of you that session survey, it's not helpful at all. For some of you, it's maybe moderately helpful. But in any case, it gives us a sense that we are on point. The sessions are on point. Students are saying that they align with the goals of the day. So there's that. But we also wanted to get a deeper sense of what students were getting out of this, so we created an exit survey. And 57 students responded, so not quite a representative sample, you could say, but nonetheless, I think representative in some ways because most of the people who responded did go to 2 or more sessions with a significant amount going to 4. So people who are really committed to the day, so it's good to get their perspectives. And this is what we learned from that survey, which, like all surveys, can be improved and will be improved. Let's see, is there a delay? Should I wait? Okay, there we go. So this is what they reported as piquing their interest in the day. So a lot of people just driven by their own curiosity. The respondents could check as many things as they wanted here, but their own curiosity and extra credit opportunities were the top ones there. In terms of the general goals of the day, so remember it's a day about planning for your college experience, getting advice and help with succeeding in college, and then thinking about what comes after North Hennepin. And I pressed that button a few seconds ago, so we're going to wait. There it is. Yeah. Oh, you're okay, Sasha. Thank you. HR in the house. Got to be careful, folks. All right. Cool. Thank you, Sasha. So Not the best visual here, but if you look at that light orange and the light blue, that's people reporting either they got some help with this topic or a lot of help. And these were the main ones, exploring different programs of study, understanding the process of completing, developing those skills and knowledge for success, and then thinking about the next step after North Hennepin. So again, good. Yeah, thank you. And this really wasn't one of the major goals of the day. Our goal wasn't to get people to take more classes at North Hennepin, but we were curious about whether this was having an effect. So just keeping in mind that these are all people who are already taking classes at North Hennepin, I think it's pretty good to hear that 63% of these respondents said that they were even more interested coming out of this day. So there's that. One person was less interested, and we might reach out to them to understand why. And more connected to the goal of the day, how did these people leave feeling about their ability to choose a program and complete it? And the wide majority said that they, well, I shouldn't say the majority, but yes, the majority said that they did feel more able to. Thank you. So again, I think a good sign that the work that everyone put into this is paying off. So with that, nonetheless, there's a lot of room for improvement. So I'll bring up our fearless leader, Tracy Hunter, to talk about that.
That's a scary thought, fearless leader. Okay, not one of the shorties. So this is where we get into your feedback for continuous improvement for us. And, I don't know about you, but I'm often a post-processor, so if you're still thinking about it and if an idea comes up, please, please, please feel free to reach out to Brandon or myself and give us your ideas, because you're a part of this day as well, and it really is about making it a good and useful day for all of us, but certainly for our students. So here's some feedback that we got from you guys. More and better signage. Yes, we're on it. We have great ideas. Stay tuned. Get schedule finalized sooner and begin advising sooner. Absolutely. Can't even tell you all the things that went wrong that got in the way of that, but we have plans to address that for next year. Maybe focus less on extra credit and having students ask for extra credit for attending. That's great feedback. And probably does matter for some students. We also know some students don't do optional, and they like to get something out of it. So we'll continue to put the idea out there. Please remember, faculty, it's your option. You guys don't have to do it, but students like to get a little something. Be more mindful about busy times for check-in. That's great feedback, because everybody really does kind of come at the same time, and have the more volunteers at that time. More QR codes with relevant information and session surveys. Thank you very much. And then split Vingo lunch and tabling so students can participate in more or all, versus having them all going on at the same time, maybe give some time. So we're definitely taking that in as well. Again, if you have any other feedback, please feel free to get it to us. Thank you, Vanna. So how to get involved? February 25th, we're going to be starting to plan for next September 2025. So please be here, bring your ideas and your energy, your passion to make this day as great as we can. And then please feel free to join the Pathways Planning Day Committee, and you can reach out to Brandon or I or anybody actually. We take all are welcome. And please know that I'll be sending out my please get involved also if you don't join the committee. We'll find a way to get you hooked in. All right, thank you guys. I think that's it. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I know our students appreciate you. I know, as in all exit surveys, students, we don't actually get the response from everybody, but I know that they enjoyed it. I know they enjoyed your interactions. We had sessions with people standing outside the door. We had students coming back for food. I think one of the best things we did this year is go to the buffet line, so that even though we had more people, we actually had enough food for everybody, and that means a lot to us. But thank you all for your time and effort.
Joseph Collins, Strategic Planning Co-Chair. Good to see everyone today. I'm just going to provide a few brief updates as to where the strategic planning process is at. Next slide, please. Sasha, or let's see if this works now. Hey, this works now. Maybe. So this is the timeline that we have for strategic planning. We kicked it off at the August Duty Days. We had a Getting Organized workshop at the end of September, which was really about how we are going to gather data for the strategic plan. It was 2 days of training for the strategic planning task force, and so that's heavily in progress right now. And then the next major milestone that we have is the visioning conference here in, sense making, wrong one. In November, just before Thanksgiving, we'll have another full day event. So that's kind of where the timeline is at right now. Okay, so it works half the time. So I've hyperlinked these, so if the slide deck gets sent out, all of our information right now for the strategic planning process is out in the strategic planning group in SharePoint. Everyone has access to it. We have the artifacts from the Getting Organized Day and from the data discussion meeting that we had on October 11th. Right now is where we are in kind of the meat and potatoes of strategic planning. So after the Getting Organized Days, the task force was paired up, and all of the pairs are going out and interviewing stakeholder groups, whether it's student groups, community groups, employee groups, and all of that data is being compiled in SharePoint. And then what we're going to start doing is at the sense-making day, that's when we're going to take a look at all of the data and start distilling it down and start looking at trends in the data that would help inform our strategic plan. So the themes and things will start coming out in November, and then we have the next two major milestones are Visioning Conference in January and Goals Conference in February. And by February, we'll really start to know where the goals of our strategic plan lie. That being said, one of the things that I wanted to mention a little bit is, as we've started looking at data, both qualitative data and quantitative data, so we shared a few weeks ago some of the quantitative data, I'm drawing a blank, but the facts about our institution, our completion data, things like that, where we are. What's become really evident is the strategic planning process is more qualitative, and we have quantitative data that we need to overlay with it. And so one of the things that we're starting to, we're meeting with the Meet and Confers this week, but one of the things that I think is going to be pretty evident is we probably need to make completion one of the institutional goals for the strategic plan for a couple of reasons. We saw the data that was shared. One of the pieces is that it really aligns with the institutional goal around Equity 2030. A couple other pieces is HLC. As we look back at the past 18 months, HLC has asked us to make it a priority as an institution. There's impacts even to our funding. And so we're starting to lean that way, that as part of the strategic planning process, we may, rather than, that we may make completion as an institutional goal and still allow the strategic planning process to complete the rest of our goals through the process. But it's very evident that we need to focus on completion as an institution. So I just wanted to prime the audience and the community that that is something we're looking at. And so we're meeting with Meet and Confers, as I said, this week, and there'll be more information to come on that. And that's what I have. All right, so any feedback, the strategic planning email box, the suggestion box on the website is anonymous feedback, so if you have anonymous feedback that you want to send in. But otherwise, thank you. That's the update where strategic planning is at right now.
Kyle. I'm going to invite Justice up now to introduce our speaker. So we're excited to have you. Thanks.
Hello, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Sick. Hi, welcome. Happy Tuesday, bright and early. I am Justice Fisher. I work in the diversity department. I am one of the lovely diversity and equity specialists. We have Christy back there. Wave your hands. Yay. Shout out to Christy for joining the team. This is her first duty day, so woo. I am so excited to be up here this morning to introduce our speaker for today's Access and Accessibility Workshop. Lauren Jones is a seasoned diversity, equity, and inclusion professional with over a decade of experience dedicated to fostering equitable and justice-oriented environments across various sectors. As both a scholar and practitioner, Lauren's work is grounded in her commitment to centering marginalized voices and speaking truth to power. She holds degrees from Western Illinois University and Old Dominion University and is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota's College of Education and Human Development, where her research focuses on the intersections of race, gender, and organizational dynamics. Throughout her career, Lauren has collaborated with higher education institutions, government agencies, and nonprofits to advance policies that promote diversity and inclusion. With more than 15 years in higher education and a thriving DEI consulting firm, Lauren brings a wealth of knowledge and practical expertise to every project. She's originally from Chicago and now resides in North Minneapolis with her partner and 2 dogs. I am honored to welcome Lauren Jones to NHCC. Let's please give her a warm welcome.
All right, while he's doing that, I just want to check in to make sure everybody can access my voice. Can everybody hear what I'm saying right now? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to kind of talk about myself for just a few minutes while he works on the slider thing or whatever. So first of all, thank you all for having me this morning. It's a beautiful day. It's been like sleeveless, but I also get hot, so. And so I'm excited to spend time with you for approximately 90 minutes. Thank you, Justice, and thank you, Ida, who invited me. I really, really appreciate spending some time with you. You all have been okay, yes. Y'all have been super warm already. So we're gonna jump into the presentation in just a second. Justice did give a bit of background about the work that I do, but just to orient you a little bit more, I'm at the School of Public Health, where I've been for just over 7 years. And this week actually is the American Public Health Association's conference, and so I'm just coming from that yesterday, where we did a panel presentation on health equity, and then my dissertation, which I don't talk about too much just because we're not done yet. But I'm on chapter 4, so we are wrapping it up very quickly, is on professional Black women in Minnesota and the experiences that they have and how they make sense of them. So we can talk about that a little bit more on the side. But feel free as we get to the end to ask me questions about how all of that plays into this work. So today we're talking about access and accessibility, which is part of the work that we do at the School of Public Health and across education. So I know that you all know a lot about this, and so hopefully this is a conversation, not me just pouring into you, but us really expanding the wisdom that we have. So to start with, I like to kind of separate the ideas of access and accessibility into a couple of different pieces. So access is about the bare minimum, right? And so we know that all of us have different access needs. For us to come into the room today, for us to be able to understand the communications that's happening, for us to be able to breathe and hear, all of that requires different access needs. Some of us need completely different access needs or accommodations, if you will. And so that's just the bare minimum. We have the ADA, for example. I'll talk about that a little bit. And I, again, consider that like the floor. And so when we're talking about an accessible organization, an accessible website, an accessible document, we're going much more beyond that bare minimum. Accessibility or universal design or inclusive design is also about designing a good experience, one that works well for everyone. There is no building that I'm aware of, no built environment, no document that I'm aware of that every single person on earth can access, unfortunately, just because we speak different languages, we have different site needs, we have different mobility needs. So universal access isn't quite a fantastic term, but we can certainly expand access. If y'all want to give me a break from talking, feel free to throw your hand up at any point, by the way. Language is one part of that, right? So what language we speak different dialects. My husband is from Louisiana. He's from Cajun country. And he likes to say that Cajuns don't understand Creoles, like if they're speaking French or French dialect. And I'm like, okay, I'm not from Louisiana, I'm from Chicago, so I don't know. But we had a really, really interesting conversation about that. Just like, really? So, like, they came down from Canada, and then what happened in the forest? And it's very, I don't know. But then, you know, our accent, what kind of jargon we use in our professional settings, et cetera. So all of that is an example. And then affordability. So that is less about our bodies and more about our class, our income, what kinds of resources do we have access to. So I also like to talk about that. And also because it is an issue of intersectionality. Most of our disabled folks also have issues with accessing things because of the cost of them, right? So let's move on. Questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. So the floor, ADA and compliance, I like to remind people I don't do compliance work. I'm trying to help people like achieve their highest self. And so compliance is just like, just obey the law. We're taking you beyond that. But just so we remind ourselves, what is the law? The Americans with Disabilities Act became law in 1990. It's a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disability in all areas of public life, including jobs, transportation, public and private places that are open to the general public. So this room, this building, this campus, my campus, et cetera, are considered public schools, public institutions. So people should have access to them because they would have a need to be educated or a need to be in these spaces. The ADA gives civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities similar to those provided to individuals on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, age, and religion. And again, we know that those identities often intersect with folks with disabilities. So the breadth of disability or ability includes many, many different things. And I could name all of these. I won't, but I will say that I know that all of these impact all of us in this room in some way, whether it's something that you have been diagnosed with, something that you will be diagnosed with, or something that you manage each day. You don't need a diagnosis. And then also some of us have family members and people in our care and in our circles that we are in relationship with, and we recognize that this all impacts us. So I'll just cover just a couple. So chronic illness, chronic pain, immunocompromised, disability that has to do with brain injuries, people who have gone to war and had those types of injuries, people who have amputations, et cetera. And then folks who also manage their mental illness. I have anxiety and depression. I'm always surprised that everybody has not had that diagnosis yet. Like, not even being funny, I'm like, this world, you're not anxious? Like, how do you do that? But yeah, so most of the women in my family have also been hospitalized for mental illness as well. And so it's an ongoing battle with all of these things. And if you consider yourself able-bodied today, that is a temporary status, right? We recognize that at some point you will be diagnosed or you will be injured, and then, you know, God willing, the creek don't rise. You will reach a point in your life where you will have multiple disabilities, usually at your older age. And so there is a large breadth of folks who have disabilities and manage disabilities in different ways. Just a few thoughts and statistics around neurodiversity. So approximately 15 to 20% of the world's population is considered neurodivergent. In 2021, the Centers for Disease Control estimated that 1 in 44 children have autism or are on the autism spectrum. In 2019, researchers at Drexel University estimated that between 700,000 and 1 million people with autism are expected to turn 18 over the next decade. And currently, the unemployment rate among people with autism or ASD remains high, with some estimates coming in at over 80%. And that's from Harvard. And so this is what seems like to be an expanding population. And so I think we have a lot of work to do around, like, what does this look like when we're welcoming these folks into our classrooms, into our workplaces, and to our homes? How do we help support each other? I know there's some autistic folks in the room, and how do we help make sure that our spaces, our homes, and our facilities, and the documents and the technology that we use are also accessible to folks who have ASD. I also want to just quickly address the first person language. Something that there's a fantastic show on Netflix. I think it's called, what is it? Yeah, no, not Love on the Spectrum. It's like a Atypical, yes. Do y'all like that show? Who said that? Yes, okay. And they had so the show is about a young man. He's high school age and he's on the spectrum. And then he has this whole family story. His mom and dad and sister are, living with him. And so it's a really, really sweet, wholesome sitcom, I guess. But they had a conversation in one episode about should we use first person language or should we use disability first? And they didn't really land anywhere. It was basically everybody needs to kind of determine for themselves what feels appropriate. I've also had this conversation with people in my life, how do you refer to or how do you introduce, these different things. And so I go back and forth, and so it is not meant to be disrespectful in any way. I don't have a person directly in my life who is currently diagnosed. I know that somebody probably should be diagnosed, my nephew, but I think it just depends on, the person and how they identify. Yes. Oh, yeah. So a way to describe this would be there is a person with autism, which I think I already said, and then there is the term an autistic person. So the first person, or person first language would put the person's like pronouns or like name first, and like Jenny has autism, or an autistic person named Jenny. Does that make sense? Okay. Other questions? Correct. Yeah. Other people thoughts, because I'm still learning, right? And so I want us to make sure that we're open to other ideas. Other uses of that might be like a person who is deaf or a deaf person. Some people have also told me like they don't like the idea of with, because that's like a purse. So like a person with leukemia or whatever. And so thinking about how do we phrase our language around people's disabilities is very fluid and it's very personal. So I don't have one straight answer for you. Questions about that? Other thoughts? Okay. And the other last point was just that Microsoft launched a neurodiversity hiring program. I don't have any comments on that, but I do think it's interesting that some of the larger companies are starting to recognize that, hey, we have a lot of neurodivergent folks who work in our field, and we want to start to make sure that we're recognizing their brilliance and their needs, and not completely taking them out of the job force. Because a lot of times the application processes that we implement exclude a lot of people very quickly. And it could be for any number of reasons. And so I'll talk about our processes in a little bit. But thank you for your question. So what is accessible in your school or your classroom? And so we can talk about this a little bit. I'll make sure I don't get behind. And we'll do Q&A at the end as well. So your website, I'll start with that. Do you have an IT person in the room who can? No? I'm not going to blame anybody. I just want to, I think we've had so many meetings and policies at the U that have come down around accessibility on our website. So this is partly like the colors that we use, the size of our font, is something downloadable? Are the documents that we, like the PDFs that we put up there, are they something that folks can read with different site needs, et cetera? So there's a ton of ways that websites can be inaccessible, and so we've tried to do a lot of work around accessibility, considering folks' different needs. It could also be around like the sound. A lot of us don't use sound anymore, thank God, but it was like a big thing back in the earlier days of the internet. It was just like everybody had a sound when you went on their website, right? And so thinking about, is your website accessible? That's usually the first interaction that folks have with you as an organization. Is like, hey, let me go on, let me apply to this job or this opportunity, and if they can't access it, if they can't read it, is it in the right language, et cetera, then they're probably not going to continue the interaction. Furniture is interesting because we all, again, have different needs. I have a little bit of knee trouble, and so sometimes I don't like to sit very low. Other folks have what folks in the like sewing industry would call a wider seat. I have a wider seat too, and so I understand that. So is your furniture accessible to the general population, and then is it accessible to folks who have other kinds of needs? And I'm also left-handed, right? And so going into different classrooms as a kid, and even now sometimes, a lot of the desks were just not useful for me. And so it's not that all of the furniture needs to be accessible to everybody, but some of the furniture at least needs to be accessible to different kinds of bodies and different kinds of needs. Do y'all have, for bathrooms, do y'all have gender neutral restrooms here? Okay. So that's good. And we also need to consider different kinds of bodies beyond that. Sometimes we have wider bathrooms for folks in wheelchairs and other kinds of needs. and so on and so forth. I do want to address the book situation. I haven't been in a situation where I've needed to buy books in a while, but when I was in undergrad especially, books would run us, $500 to $1,000. What are y'all doing to create more accessible ways for students to get their books? Red shelf? What's that? I'm sorry. Perfect. Okay. He said digital textbooks. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, good morning, bookstore director. We have a very robust inclusive access program on our campus that allows students to have their digital textbooks loaded to their D2L page by the first day of class, and those textbooks and course material fees are actually added to their tuition and fees. So they don't. It's all bundled in with those those fees. It's all students can use financial aid to pay for it. We also have a lot of other digital options for textbooks. We try and do as many different textbook options as we can in the store, and we're looking at moving possibly to an equitable access textbook model in the future.
What's
Got
your name?
questions? Come and see us.
Yes. What's your name? Sorry.
My name is Tracy.
Tracy, I really, really appreciate that. So you covered a bunch of different ways that people need to access books. And at any college or university, perhaps maybe more even at a community college, students need access to books, and it is not easy coming from a low-income background or whatever, and you need to have consistent and clear access. Did you have something? Thank you. Yeah, so the font thing is important, and so like translating that into something that they can actually access is important, and then also, like you said, following the laws of our state and our federal system. So books is a huge one because we are at a college. I'm a library kid. I grew up in the library. I am always going to advocate for folks to spend time in the library, for folks to take their bodies to the library if possible, but also the library should have, I'm not calling out the librarian, by the way, the library should have digital access for folks who cannot spend a lot of time in the library because of different reasons. I was at, we live in Weber Camden, so I was at the library there, and there was like a fight in the library. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't even write my dissertation without people boxing in front of me. But stuff happens in the library, snow happened, whatever. And so what are other ways that our students can make sure they access the literature that they need? Lectures, which I obviously am doing in front of you, but as a person who speaks for a living partially, there's a lot of ways that we can make our conversations and our lectures more accessible. Give me some examples if you don't mind. Because y'all do this too, so I'm sure you have them. Yeah. Yep. 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 Perfect. Yep. Other folks? Yep. Perfect. So we got HiFlex and we got digital recorders. Yep.
giving them terms that they can read, incorporate, versus having lots and lots of texts, which, thank you, having lots and lots of text, which then just turns them into transcription mode and sort of has them disengage. So it's having different kinds of materials in a lecture so that people can engage with it without getting too exhausted by it, hopefully.
Yep. Thank you for that. Y'all have so many great ideas. I don't even know why I'm here.
Just a quick announcement.
Yeah.
We do have microphones. It's hard to hear sometimes, so just let us know. Raise your hand. We'll walk over. Sorry.
Perfect example. So I, believe it or not, do not like talking into a microphone. I don't like the feedback in my ear, but we do have to recognize that people have different hearing needs, right? Audio needs. And so I have made it my practice to use a microphone every time I'm in a space that there's multiple people in, and I don't know everybody's needs and I don't need to know. So I think pushing us towards or I would say away from the need to ask everybody, do you need accommodations, and just move towards creating spaces where everybody can access your voice or whatever information they need. There was another one that I'm thinking about. Oh, so are folks also teaching on Zoom to some extent? You said HiFlex, so I assume. With Zoom, are you using the captions as well? Okay, so I was a big fan of captions before I was a big fan of captions before COVID, because I watch a lot of like BBC shows, and so I don't always understand what they're talking about, especially if they're Welsh or whatever. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I had a question about something you said just a bit ago.
Yeah.
About you, and I agree with this, don't need to know everyone's particular needs. So my question is, maybe it's a little off topic now, so sorry, but do you have any advice on how to encourage students to self-advocate? Thanks.
You're welcome.
So I want to hear from you all in the room as well. But, I'm assuming you all have this thing on your syllabus. This is kind of like standard language about if you need accommodations, come and talk to me, blah, blah, blah. And I think we should continue to use that. But I also think we probably need to have a conversation around that instead of just like the first day, have ongoing conversations with folks. The reality is, people don't have diagnoses a lot of times, so they can't legally say, I need blah, blah, blah. Secondly, they might not be comfortable using ADA accommodations or your disability offices for different reasons. And then thirdly, people's needs will change throughout even a semester. Maybe they went to a concert and they lost a portion of their hearing last night. And so I think it should be an ongoing conversation throughout however long they are with you. And then I also think maybe inviting somebody into the space to talk about do you have a disability services kind of office here? Yeah, so maybe inviting someone to just have a quick presentation. Say, hey, you know, here are the types of accommodations we have, and here's how we help folks. And if you're not able to use these or you're not comfortable using these, here are some other resources that I can point you to. Other thoughts on that, though? Or ways that you have advocated for students to use resources? Yeah, you and then the front person.
My first semester teaching here, I had a student that just absolutely failed the first exam. And so I sat down with her and she just like, I don't know what happened. I just forgot everything. I'm like, well, that sounds like test anxiety. She was an older black woman and first person in her family to go through college. So she had no idea what services we had. So Tom Lynch was still here. So I'm like, we're going to go down and talk to Tom. He was our accessibility guy and director, and like she didn't know that was an option, or she didn't even know what to ask for. So just sitting down, and I literally walked her down there, so she knew, because I don't know if she'd ever been to the library. She wouldn't know where to physically find the place. So just kind of that, you know, and then she knows I have her support, or you know, she'll get my support when you know, whatever diagnoses she gets, or you know, whatever help she gets. So
I think as much as possible we have to normalize that we have anxiety, that we have depression, that we have neurodiversity, that it has to be just part of being human, as opposed to something that makes you atypical. And for somebody who does, I am more typical, quote unquote, right? It's harder for me to do that, but then I can be very empathetic when my students tell me I'm struggling with depression. It's like, oh, you know, thank you for sharing, and here's some resources, and let me know what I can do to support you, and not making it like, well, you know, if you're depressed, then get out of my class, which nobody does, but I think sometimes the way that we react sends unintentional messages, and so being aware of how we're reacting if somebody reveals, and just viewing it as it's normal, it's part of being human.
Pass it this way. It was, yeah.
I used to work in K-12 education, and something that I always implemented in my classroom was just giving options whenever, like, as much as possible, in how things can be accessed and also how information can be brought back, so that people can, like, we're still, you know, achieving similar learning outcomes, but also tapping into different student needs and opportunities and showing strengths, because there's lots of different ways that information can be shared and that we can show what we know.
Oh, there's so many. There's a couple on this side, on my left. Okay.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm an academic advisor, and I was born deaf in one ear, but when I was in graduate school, I found out I had attention deficit disorder. And so not everybody can do this, but on my emails, it says that I have disabilities, that I'm welcome to you talking to me about them. And when I'm working with students, I usually self-identify that I have attention deficit disorder, have other disabilities, and children that have many different disabilities, and they've told me I can tell people about that. And it's amazing how many students will tell me they're depressed, they have anxiety, they have attention deficit disorder. And just knowing that I have it, I think somehow helps, because then I know they have somebody that can identify with how hard it is to function, right? And so when I didn't know I had attention deficit disorder, I was deaf in one ear, so I would sit by somebody nice, and I'd say, I can't hear what the teacher just said. But the reality was that I could grasp the big concepts. I would put those words down, and then I would lose the linking words. And I would say, can I copy your notes? And they would say, sure. And I'd say, I'm deaf in one ear. Is that okay? And it normalized that for me, but the problem was is that it was greater than my hearing disability. So, I mean, you might have students in your room that are like that.
Yeah, and thank you for that, and we'll keep passing it. I will say that, like I was saying on the caption thing, it's more than just like I can't hear, right? It's more like I didn't capture what you were saying, and I don't necessarily understand the phrasing that you're using. I'm a native English speaker, but some folks are not, and so being able to record and also see the words on a screen adds a layer of understanding for me, because there is a lot of cognitive complexity sometimes in listening to and understanding lectures or other information that you're giving. Yeah.
When I had first started teaching classes, a mentor of mine had said, this was before COVID, but handing out note cards on the first day too, and just asking them to share things about themselves, and that's where you can kind of call it out and get to know your students too, of just, do you have accommodations? Is there something I should know about you, how I can be a better teacher and educator for you? And that's where I'd find out things about accommodations that, maybe hard of hearing. Somebody was a parent, and had, those obligations. So you'd find out about different identities and other accommodations. And I thought that was always really helpful to get to know your students right away.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say that as you continue to pass the mic, there are a lot of power dynamics that we want to be aware of with our students. You mentioned race and gender and age, and so those are just like three, and we can bring in like size and religion and whatever. And so there will be different levels of comfort with folks in these spaces, right? And so you mentioned an older Black woman. I imagine she's been through a lot of things in her life where somebody was telling her that she can't do something. So that might be triggering for people to kind of both start to recognize I may have a disability, and also this white man is telling me I have a disability and I can't do something, and now I have to get accommodations from another white person. Like, that's a lot, right, to go through all at once. And again, thinking about age and gender. And so everybody's not gonna be able to discuss their needs with us, and that's okay. And so as we move towards accessibility, we move away from the need to know everybody's personal information. Yes, whoever was next.
So I'm thinking in the communication and media classes, I make a point to say, look, the entire intent of making something accessible in a classroom or in society is that it does make it better for everyone. Like curb cutouts make it better for everyone, and they're accessible. And so the narrative in class is, look, if there's something that you think would help you learn, or that would help, then tell me early, because then I can make it better for everyone, and that includes the people who don't help. So thinking about accessibility is not I'm making it easier, it's I'm making it better for everybody.
Everyone to access, yep. Thank you all, this is fantastic.
Just to add to what Deanna had said earlier about destigmatizing mental health, I think in the classroom and more broadly, acknowledging sort of the myth of the able body, and that's historically what these spaces have been designed for, and that this classroom, this institution is foregrounding inclusivity and what that means, because that may be something that is useful to gloss, but I think more broadly in other areas outside the classroom as well, that we are all positioned differently, and in the classroom, the instructor included.
Thank you. Again, I'm very open with my disabilities, but everybody won't be. But I appreciate you all really leaning into that. Like, this is normal. It's normal to be depressed in this weird world we live in. Yes.
So just coming from as a student at another college and everything, and I had to do a lot of self-advocating because it was an accessible college. So I had to do that self-advocating. But coming now here and working here in an environment that is accessible and everything, and just it's reiterating what everybody has said. It's like, but when you as teachers and you as directors and just like a professional environment is like, hey, we're open, we're willing, what do you need? That first question or that first statement of like in the interviewing process of like, what do you need as a person with a disability and everything, it's like that means so much. So mine, it's really not like, here's a suggestion. I'm just applauding you guys of being so open and accessible. It means a lot. So.
I basically, when I apply for my classroom, we receive accommodation letters, so I basically just apply those accommodations to every student.
I like that. Yeah, thank you. I think
Hi, yeah, mine is a small suggestion. On my syllabus, I put the standard language about if you have a disability, contact Access Services. And our Access Services here are great. They are very organized and they're very warm too and welcoming. That, yeah, for real. So I feel like those students are really getting their needs addressed. For me, it's that additional 5% that might not consider themselves of having a disability or know it, or so I add some personal language on my syllabus that says something like, if you think you might, you know, have a little something, or if you think there's, you know, if you're considering or you sense that there might be some obstacles to your learning, go down and check with those guys. They'll help you figure out what's going on and what you can do about it. And I've had good success with that.
Good. And another piece of that is getting a diagnosis is actually really difficult for some folks. I went through the ADD diagnosis process. It's very expensive. It takes months to even see the physician. It's a whole thing. And so diagnoses may not come until much later in life for a lot of us as well. Anyone else? Oh, one more person, and then we'll. Agree. Yep.
Hi, I teach education, and I'm a retired K-12 teacher, but I had this 7th grader that taught me something about accessibility. I came into my homeroom one year, and I was a little guy sitting in a chair in the middle of the room, and it was the first day of school, and he said, Ms. Moore, I'm here early because I need to talk to you. I'm vision impaired. And I said, what? And he said, oh, great. He said, I can't see and you can't hear. How's this gonna work? And that little guy was the greatest kid. But in our home base, we brought in those days, we had albums, you know, so I brought in Stevie Wonder albums because he had Braille on the Stevie, and this child was learning Braille. And so we made it a homeroom activity. So we had Stevie Wonder, and we had Braille lessons, and we were all learning in our little home base. I mean, it was like, 15 kids. But I'll never forget that kid. I'll never forget his honesty and his humor. And I just thought I would share that.
Thank you so much.
Very funny.
I love a moment of levity. Thank you for that. And thank you all for sharing. Again, the wisdom is in the room, not at the front of the room. I'm just facilitating the conversation. Okay, so we'll keep moving, and there's still plenty of time for you all to chip in, if you will. Events, so we've kind of covered some of that already. The one thing I will say about events is the food that we serve needs to be more accessible if it is not already. I don't serve pork anymore at the events that we throw. We don't use a lot of alcohol anyway, but be thoughtful about that for different reasons. Folks don't drink or don't want to be around alcohol. And then the parking situation, just as an anxious person, just consider, especially like off-campus events, are there places for people to park, get out, be able to access the front doors, et cetera. And then I'll talk about recruitment processes in a second. Okay. So I have the principles of universal design here. So this is the design and composition of an environment and can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. And again, I would say there is very little in our world that is universally accessible, but we can move towards that. So there are principles that the creators of this paradigm created. So equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and then size and space for approach and use. So someone already mentioned the cut curbs, but I just want to point out just a couple of the ways that we can look at how universal access, universal design has been used. So that first one there, it appears to be a hospital or some sort of public building where you see the glass doors. So we all have become accustomed to the big glass doors. There's at least 5 different ways probably that those create more accessibility for all folks, or most folks. So I can look into the room or the lobby and see what's happening. Some folks will be like, oh, that's too many people, that's overwhelming for me, or I'm already overstimulated, I'm not going up in there. And you can also look out. And so you look out and you're like, oh, the weather is terrible today. I will wait until XYZ. Then there is the width of the space. And so if you are a person who has mobility needs, different mobility needs, you're pushing a stroller, you're pushing somebody in a wheelchair, you're using a cane, et cetera. You have different, you have a wider access entryway, and then also if you're in a group of people, you can hold hands with somebody or facilitate somebody, help them walk in, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, nobody has to touch any doorknobs. And so in the age that we're in, considering, COVID and RSV and the flu and all the things, not having to put your hands on a doorknob or a handle is always great. So then we have the cut curb. I feel like everybody's heard that story, but it was created for one use, but then lots more people use it. So if you use a wheelchair, if you are pushing a stroller, again, everybody finds that useful, but then folks who are walking on 2 legs also find this useful, so they don't have to lift your leg up a little bit higher, or if you're with pets, for example. I have 2 dogs, and so just a lower entry onto the street is helpful for so many folks. And then the closed captions, which we already talked about, which I use for pretty much everything that has closed captions. I use it. So a few best practices, and then I'm going to ask you all for some more as well. So create multiple ways to access events. So thank you all to the folks who've planned this. So you have folks who are online, I presume. I see some messages going back and forth. Folks who are in the space, folks who are standing up around the room for different reasons. And so I really appreciate there's different ways to be in the space and to learn with us today and in this time. And then if you can record it for folks who still can't access it at that same time, also great. Take the mic, we already talked about that. Hiring interpreters, so whether it is ASL, so American Sign Language, or folks who speak different languages, we at the University of Minnesota, we will ask people if they need ASL for our virtual events, and then for the commencement ceremony, at least we hire Spanish and a couple of other languages for folks to be able to participate audio-wise in our commencement ceremony so they can celebrate their family member or friend who's graduating. Asking about accessibility in your software purchases, so this might only apply to a couple of people in the room, but if you are doing a large contract with really anybody, I think that needs to be part of the conversation. In yesterday's panel, Vajong Mua, who works at Blue Cross Blue Shield, shout out to him, he does the health equity work for them, and they are working on a bill that asks our lawmakers to upfront create the racial equity impact ahead of time. So if you're going to create a new bill, we need to know how will this impact folks who do not fall within the center of our community. So folks who don't speak English as the first language, folks who are not Christian, folks who have disabilities, Muslim, Somali, Hmong, et cetera. How will those communities be impacted, and creating data ahead of time? So taking that, I think this is really important when we think about what will be the impact on folks who use different software, maybe use a plugin to access your books or whatever. How are these software purchases accessible? What has been the impact? What have you heard? How do we support, or how do you support us in this ongoing contract? And then last but not least, is there a free way for us to do this? And for the university or the institution, we probably have access to some funds, not a lot of funds, but we got some money. For the folks who want to access that program or event, can they do it for free? So as many events as that we can, we create them for free and also virtually online. So folks across the country can access the School of Public Health event and learn more about racial and health equity without being enrolled in the School of Public Health. Everybody doesn't want to pay our tuition. Everybody doesn't want to travel to Minneapolis. Everybody doesn't want to park on campus. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have access. We are a state institution. We serve the state, and I believe we should make it free as much as we can. What are some other best practices that you all, because you've kind of tossed out a lot, but any other ones around accessibility generally that you use? Yes. Thank you to the mic people. I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, so when I teach classes that have a lot of symbols in them, and make sure the text is one where I can go in and change what the screen reader is going to tell the student the symbol is. And I think that's really important because when a student is in a classroom and they hear me saying, like when I'm teaching logic or something, right, and I'm saying horseshoe or arrow or wedge, and the textbook that's getting read to them is using a different word for that, there may be just a complete disconnect, right? And that's going to be a big barrier for that student. And most open access or most textbooks have some ability for you to do that for screen readers. And then a second thing is just buying fatter markers to write on the whiteboard with, right? Like if I sit in the back of the classroom, I can't see black marker on the whiteboard very well. And that's a pretty simple fix for a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you for that. Other folks? General accessibility practices.
I think building it into your assignments, we have our students do an accessibility analysis of different types of media or explore questions related to representation of people with disabilities in film or TV production. So I think having the students do their own analysis to think about it gives them some perspective rather than just kind of hearing it.
I love it. Yeah, building into the actual assignments. Back of the room.
So this goes back to something you said, I think, in a couple slides ago, but especially for students who English is not their first language, I use as simple vocabulary as possible. I talk slowly, much more slowly when I lecture. And also, I make sure that when I write exams, I teach math, I use the same phrasing as I did in lecture and homework. So if they've, heard me say it over and over again in class, they know what the question is asking because they've seen that exact same phrasing before.
Great. I have to, as the justice, be thoughtful about the idioms that I use, especially we have a lot of students who literally just arrived from China and India. We have a lot of Chinese and Indian students, and it's like, well, we use a lot of sports idioms in America, for example, and so it's like, oh, you hit it out the park, or you, whatever. And so just thinking about what's a clearer way for you to say that before you start confusing people. Yes.
Hi. One way that I think we all kind of do across departments that I think is so helpful for our students is when a student comes asking for like help or resources, literally walking them to that department. I am someone who's directionally challenged. I don't know east from west to north to south. Like, I have no idea. So going out of your way, taking like 5 minutes to walk that student to the department is so helpful, and it allows for an easy handoff. I know in the diversity department as well, like, we ensure our doors are open all of the way. We have small doorways, so ensuring that they're accessible for all folks, as well as like ensuring like the noise isn't too loud, or like people aren't getting overstimulated just from like the amount of people or amount of bodies in a room. So giving people space is also really important for us.
Great. Thank you, Justice. Anyone else? And you'll think of them later today, and you can share those with each other after I leave. So we're rounding out the couple of slides that I have. I don't want to overwhelm you with white on black slides. They're so exciting. So one thing to think about is that we're not out of COVID, but we are, on the downtrend, we'll say. And so that has been and continues to be the largest mass debilitating or disabling event in our history. And long COVID will be with us for the rest of our lives, if not beyond. So that we're aware of, there's cardiological, neurological, and respiratory symptoms that are common. I know a lot of people have extreme fatigue, cloudiness in their thoughts and memory. And so I think we're at the very beginning stages of starting to understand what long COVID is. I know I've seen a lot of stories of young athletes dying from like heart attacks and strokes, and that is wild to me, right? To see an 18 or 20-year-old pass away all of a sudden. And so we're just now starting to study what long COVID is doing to us, but that's something to consider as we move into this next phase of our country, and how are we including and considering the impacts of long COVID on our population and on people who care for those who have long COVID. There is a lot of ongoing mental illness and just distress, I'll say, from the pandemic. I think we, as a society, as a community, have not properly grieved, having lost over 1 million people in this country and countless across the world. So that part, and then also really thinking about being away from family members, those of us who lost close family members and friends during COVID and couldn't go to funerals, or there was no funeral, or there was no proper grieving period. I know I lost a coworker who I saw on a regular basis, and it was just like an announcement, like an email, right? And so what does that look like 4 or 5 years on, to really consider how is my heart, how is my mind and soul impacted by being taken away from those I love for however long you were quarantined. I'd like to remind, and we all know this, but disabled students and employees have a lot to offer, and that includes most of us in the room in some way or other, but excluding them does not help us as an organization. As a side note, as y'all were talking, I realized I didn't hear, but I'm not sure, do you have disability services for employees as well? Sort of? Okay. Yeah, so that's something to consider though, right? So I register as a person with multiple disabilities, but employees or students become employees. And so how do they register? How do they get the accommodations that they need as adults with various kinds of support mechanisms that the university or the institution can provide? And then disability justice has a lot of solutions for many issues that we have yet to explore within the academy. I don't know if I put this on there. No, okay, so that's not a paradigm that I explore here, but that very similar to the other paradigm that I showed, the framework that I showed you before, has another way for us to look at. So we have like the sociological or the social model of disability, and then we have the medical model of disability. And the way that we at the university think of it, we use the more social model. So your disability is part of your overall makeup, instead of this is a diagnosis and a prognosis for you, something that you have, that you like carry along like your little purse. It is who you are, it's a part of who you are. And so I wish I would put a slide on there for that, but the social model of disability is what we use, and we understand that that becomes a part of a person's identity and how they continue to develop. And so that kind of ends the slides, but I want us to continue to have this conversation. So I'll open it up for Q&A right now, and it could be anything. I'll pull this out. So.
I'll just address the question that you asked about employees. So we work closely with disability services or access services to help provide things to employees like ASL interpreters and stuff like that. We also have, I'm the ADA coordinator, so we do have the opportunity for employees to request accommodations. I'm going to be talking about that actually right after you, so I'm not going to go further into that right now, but there are processes that we have for employees to get access.
Amazing, thank you. Other questions and comments and thoughts?
All right. I did think it's really important. I'm a mental health therapist within the care center. Working with some of the students, a lot of the students discussed, even though some pieces are said on the syllabus or you guys have said in general as far as ask for help, a lot of the students that I've worked with don't feel comfortable even saying that, right? So having that constant discussion about here are the services, here what we can do, here's how we can support you, something that's really important. Shame is a huge thing, and I don't know how much we really talk about that, but if you haven't spoke about a disability that you have, and especially if you don't have rapport connection with the person that you want to get services from, that can be a deterrent. So having that openness, being aware, not being dismissive, right? Being aware of your words, especially if a student's coming to you and asking for help. Ask questions if there's rapport there, right? Be curious, get to know your students a little bit more, because that can help with the students feeling more affirmed to ask for services and ask for additional assistance. So.
Yeah, we haven't eliminated the stigma. I know we're talking about it here, but a lot of people still have a lot of shame around various mental illness and diagnoses. And so depression and anxiety, or what, bipolar, schizophrenia, all of these are still associated with bad things.
I just add to that sometimes it's not the shame, although it's very present. It's also the concern that if I say something, I'll be treated differently. And that can stop a lot of people.
Especially around a gender, I would say, like, probably those who identify as male are a little bit more reticent to identify with sadness or weakness in different ways, and so they don't necessarily want to have that conversation. Other folks, questions, thoughts? Yeah.
You made a good point before.
There's also some cultural pieces as well too. My family is Liberian, and there's lots of expectations of the children as far as being perfect, having perfect grades, and all of that. Self-dialogue, you internalize that. That also can serve in test anxiety, right? The student did really well with studying, right? But that pressure of, I need to make sure I succeed, I need to make sure I get this A, I need to make sure I get this scholarship, those also can be deterrents as well too. So just keeping that in mind, right? Sometimes we can say my parents are really, they have a lot of expectations of me. It's not them complaining. There also can be a lot of debilitating narratives that can be said to us that we internalize that can impact our ability to study, to be present in class, and get those information as well too. So just as another awareness.
Thank you. Is it Felicia? Hey, Felicia. Other folks? This is so good. Like, again, I don't know why I'm here. Everybody already has all of this information, but this is great.
Hi, I'm Brenda. I work in the advising office. So just the comment that I want to say is that typically when I meet with students, I already have an elevator speech going. So like I introduce myself. I typically will say, hey, I'm going to ask you questions. And if you don't know or if you're unsure, it's okay to say you don't know or you're unsure. Because then that way I can tell you things that maybe can answer those questions. I usually also lean on asking for permission. So if a student shares something with me that is like a red flag, I usually would pause and say, is it okay if I ask you more questions about that? Do you feel comfortable telling me more? Sometimes they need a hug, and I would again ask them for permission. You seem very sad. Can I give you a hug, or are you open to that? Do you need a moment? I can step out. So like asking for permission, and then also kind of just like giving them an idea of like what we're gonna go into, not knowing what they might disclose to me, especially at the beginning of a school year. That's very stressful for students because you meet students from all walks of life, and some of them are like, I don't even wanna be here because my mom and dad are forcing me to be in college, or I'm not even sure why I'm here, or you know, we talked a lot about how a lot of students may not want to disclose things, and so making it a two-way street, because I also have had students who shared with me, well, I'm supposed to act a certain way because I'm in college now and you're a professional, and so you don't need to know about, you know, how my say like boyfriend or girlfriend is treating me and how that's impacting my mental health, knowing that that then would then impact how I would perform in a classroom. So telling like, oh no, it's okay, like that's not anything that is stupid for you to share. Like obviously if it impacts your academics and it impacts your time here at North Hennepin, that's important for me to know. And so just being like, if you feel comfortable to share, please do so. If you feel like you don't want to talk to me about it, hey, look, we have these emphasizing free services on our campus so that you can use, and you don't have to worry about, you know, that we need your medical information or we need your insurance card.
Yeah, that medical record can also be a barrier too. I think this was first. Because then you have to like ask your parents, and some of them haven't talked to a doctor by themselves, et cetera. So yeah.
Hi, yeah, so I'm struggling a little bit with the idea, I want to normalize different ways of being. That's absolutely important. But the part about maybe me sort of expressing things about myself to my students, I'm a little, I'm struggling a bit with that. I think there's things that you can do as an advisor that maybe as faculty runs into other problems because of the power dynamic of the classroom. I'm concerned about centering myself as faculty member in a classroom. So I'm wondering how to negotiate that aspect of it. Because if I come to my students and I'm like, yes, I have depression, I have anxiety and all of this, then I'm making it about myself. And I don't want to do that as an instructor. So just wanted to throw that out there.
So yeah, I'll let other folks address this as well, but I do think there's a fine balance for that. It's like, hey, here's some things that I manage or deal with, and also happy to hear from you about how I can support you in what you need.
This is a general comment to what you just said that may help you process through this. And you gave me some language today that I didn't have before to explain this. Some of you know I've had a unique journey in my classroom moving to a grading system called specifications grading. And I did it in a particular way that, now I know how to say, increased tolerance for error, which we don't have a lot of in academia, actually. And what I found on that process of learning about this idea, thinking about whether I wanted to do it, thinking about how to do it, thinking about what the experts say and what I feel about my students and what would be most helpful, I found I had to overcome assumption over assumption over assumption of what we're supposed to do and look like and how we're supposed to act to be professionals in academia. And I had to say, that's an assumption. Do I care about that assumption? Do I care about maintaining that presentation? Or am I prepared to have difficult conversations with my colleagues who think I'm not being rigorous when I allow unlimited attempts on an assignment, but that increases tolerance for error. It brings down student anxiety. They can actually dig in and say, if I don't get it the first time, if I don't get it the second time, if I don't get it the 15th time, I can do it a 16th time. And so that's my specific answer or experience. What I think it sounds like, I don't presume to know, you might be experiencing is, think about, are you running into assumptions about how we're supposed to behave in academia and what we're supposed to do in academia? And then you have to have the long conversation with yourself. Do you agree with that or not?
Okay, I'm not quite sure how I can follow that. So one of the things that when we're talking about this is you have to think about all of us in the room as being somewhere on a spectrum of awareness to advocacy. And where you fall in that is going to determine what your next steps are. And I would ask, in general, I know we have the STAR Center where you can learn a lot about how the processes are and how you can make your classroom, et cetera, more accessible. But if you're not yet ready for that conversation, how would you prioritize your next steps coming out of here? What would you suggest, faculty or staff that are interested in learning more, where should they go?
This is for me, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're right. Everybody's on this learning journey, right? So it is difficult. It sounds like you have some really good sessions after today that are already set up. It depends on how you like to learn and engage. So I don't know about podcasts specifically, but I'm a podcast person. I just haven't had that topic come up. But I mentioned a couple of shows on Netflix, so that could be a way. And then, of course, there's more typical reading materials. And so I would say if y'all feel comfortable and you want to do this, to create sort of a resource list of learning materials that different folks can access at different times. And maybe the library will jump in and pull some of these into the collection as well. It's just like, hey, here's some different ways to learn about autism spectrum disorder, or mental illness, or the history of, because people like history. And we have a really interesting way of interacting with mental illness and disability in this country. And so I think that that context will be important for some people. So I think people need to learn on their own time and in their own ways. But I think you've had some really great suggestions here around like how to create a more inclusive classroom, at least, and office around like the syllabus and ongoing conversations with folks around their disabilities and abilities throughout the semester, or however your interaction with them goes, and then make it a normal part of your conversation, right? And so whether that's changing the language you use now or asking people more questions, I think that is a great start. Yes. Oh, well, somebody over here first, and then we'll come back.
Hi, I didn't introduce myself last time, I don't think. I'm Cody Schneep, I'm an accounting faculty, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial impact a lot of students face with disabilities. A lot of the government programs limit how much income you can have or number of assets, so a lot of times students need a new wheelchair, but they don't have money or funds available to it. So I just want to encourage everyone to be aware of the resources we have on campus that might be able to help. And I know a couple people mentioned literally walking students down. So if you don't know where the care center is or the food pantry or that kind of stuff, I'd encourage you guys to figure that out. And so, because you might literally need to walk a student to those spaces where they can find help. And then just be aware, like some students like an e-textbook, which might be cheaper, but some students might want a physical book, which might be more expensive. So just kind of keep that kind of stuff in mind too. Sometimes your publisher might give you a second book that you might need to lend out to a student or something. Just different ways you can maybe bring some of those financial barriers down. Thank you.
Thank you. Over here.
My name is Jessica Frazier, the Director of Access Services. And so I just wanted to follow up with your question. Myself and Eliana would be happy to meet with instructors to kind of go over some of your material that you have or wherever you want to start the process of making sure that things are accessible. If we don't have the answer, we are connected to many resources across Minn-State, and we can find the expert to make sure that we have those questions answered for you guys.
So you said something a few paragraphs ago that made me want to share this little flex moment for North Hennepin, how cool we are here. But one of the coolest things about our student body is if you walk into any of our classrooms at any given session, there's no predominant ethnicity, culture, you could say. We are a very, I tell my family it's like a living UN kind of a thing, kind of a sense. And I have the luxury of teaching psychology, and so that opens up a lot of insights into the mind, et cetera, and all that stuff. But one of the fun things about having that breadth of diversity in the room is that, and especially once the students get comfortable with you, they start to share things that they are learning, and then how they may not understand and not disagree, but they don't get it because it doesn't line up with what they're used to. And so a couple semesters ago, with one of the classes that I had, we decided let's find a mantra for our classroom, and we walked away with it of there are differences, but it's fun to find the similarities. So that's North Hennepin.
I I love that. Thank you for sharing. Feeling the love. I see one right here.
Hello. I just kind of popped into my head. I think one thing we don't think of too often in terms of accessibility, or maybe we do, is technology and the tech gap. We've discussed that kind of often recently in our TRIO department. I think this is becoming more of an issue, certainly probably in all colleges, but especially since, you had brought up COVID. In the last few years since COVID, more and more things have moved online, more new programs, Zoom, all of these things. And staff, students, faculty alike, we've all had to adjust to these things quite rapidly. And we are finding more and more that some of our students really are falling behind in adjusting to this. I see it every day. I oversee a little student computer lab area. I'm helping our students every day with very basic computer things: how to log on to a computer, how to find their email, how to log on to an email, where you see your sent folder, where you see your drafts, where you scroll down and find older emails, how you print something. Very, very basic computer needs. And we're talking about just a few years ago, again, before COVID, our office was all in-person appointments, all in person, this and that. And just because of COVID, because of everything having to shift over, again, we all had to move very quickly to learn Zoom, learn all these things. And again, it's just something to think about, because I witness it every day that our students, a lot of them are not catching up to this, and it's causing a lot of increased struggle, a lot of falling behind. So I think that's something we need to address, especially as we keep having more and more online programs. We're zooming forward. Yeah. And yep. Yep.
Thank you for that. How many people are old enough to have taken computer class? Ooh. Yeah, also that. Yeah. And my my nieces, I mean, they're immediately like out of the womb on the iPad, right? And that's like, it's not the same, right? It's like going to your email, typing out a draft, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I could see why there's a gap of like other kinds of software and computer uses that they don't.
Sorry. So again, some of it is financial access. We have a lot of students who they do not have their own computer at home. They do not have a smartphone. They have to come here to use computers on campus. They have to ask if we have any computers available for rent. And then transportation is an issue coming here to campus. TRIO offers free printing for students. Not every student is in TRIO. Not every student gets free printing. There's, I think, a small allowance for all students. I think maybe $5 per semester, something like that. That runs out. So again, all of these things, financial access, tech access, but these really are huge issues on campus for our student population.
Thank you for that. I think I saw one more, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. Somebody on this side, raise their hand. Oh.
Okay, can I go? Can I go?
Yeah.
Sick. Okay. One thing that I've noticed that has had a positive impact on students. So working in the diversity department, I don't know a lot what's going on in the classrooms except from what I'm hearing from students. And when I hear students are struggling, I'm, like, have you checked out the tutoring center? Like, let's walk over there, let's check it out. But when, and it does happen, a student falls off and they stop showing up to class, they stop coming to the diversity center, it has been so impactful when it's not just me reaching out via email, but also that faculty member, coming and talking to me. Like, I've had multiple faculty members come and speak to me like, I know the student uses the diversity center, like, have you seen them? Like, they haven't been in class, where they be at? And like, that has been so helpful because then I know like, oh, the student may be struggling and may not be sharing that, or maybe they're having issues that we don't know about that we can work together to figure out. So like a student was having transportation issues, we worked together to figure out a way to get the student transportation, like a bus pass, and teaching them how to ride the bus. Like it was so holistic care, and like that was so important for the student to get here and to go to school. But also just like mental health wise, or like if they're struggling in class and don't have a lot, and they have a lot of shame accessing access services, like knowing that it's not just one person on this campus who cares, but it's a community of people on this campus who cares about that student makes such an impact.
Thank you, Justice. Yes. I think you kind of summed it up really well, to the extent that FERPA and HIPAA will allow you to working together to make sure that our students have everything they need, both to thrive here and outside of our campuses, is why we're here. So I put just a couple of ways to reach out to me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I talk a lot about DEI and J stuff. And then if you want to email me, and then the website, which I didn't put on here, is just Maroon Consulting LLC. So I really want to thank you all, especially Justice and Ida, for inviting me and for making space for this conversation, and for you all, and your engagement has been fantastic, and it looks like the students are in good hands. So thank you all. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Can we just do one more quick? I know we just did it, but thank you so much, Lauren. We appreciate the conversation. We are going to transition into our next piece, but we are going to take just a quick 5-minute or so break. So we'll get started back here a little bit about 10:35, and when we talk about accommodations on our own campus and that process here. So take a quick break, and we'll be back here in about 7 minutes or so. If everybody could work their way back in and find your seats, we'll get started in about 1 minute. Or 1 to 2, you know. The Minnesota long start. Bring it in, people.
Let's take a seat, people. It's time to sit down. If you can hear me, put a finger up. If you can hear me, put something up in the air. A hand, a pen. If you can hear me, yes. Oh, thank you. I was sent in the hallway to get everybody back in. I was sent in the hallway to get everyone back in. And people ignored me.
Melissa does it so well, doesn't she? But so thank you, everyone. As we can, we'll continue on to the next session in a moment. I did want to take just one quick moment to acknowledge on our day about accessibility that we did, as we continue to learn as a college and we continue to grow in our own professional development. I think one thing to acknowledge is that our circumstances change frequently. When we need accessibility, when we need supports, may change in our life, and I think that's why it's so important. I know in my personal life, I've experienced that a lot in the last year, and I think what's important is that we continue to be in a space that we can grow and learn and engage, and I do just really want to say thank you all for that, because I think that's been it's been really fun to hear this conversation today. On behalf of the Duty Day Committee, I do want to acknowledge one thing. You probably noticed we didn't have an interpreter here this morning on a day about accessibility. And I just want to acknowledge we did have an interpreter scheduled and last minute had a cancellation. So you probably saw we were trying to do some alternative things with closed captions, and some of those sort of worked, sort of didn't. So it's a learning day for us as a Duty Day Committee as well. We've written down a lot of things, taken a lot of lesson learns, and we've had new ideas from just what's happened today too. So I do commit to, as a committee, we'll continue to talk about this, and we will also make sure that we have backup plans to the backup plans in the future, so that so that it is a space for that. So I just wanted to acknowledge it in case it's an elephant in the room. And bring that there too, and just acknowledge too that we're continuing to grow and learn too. So all the ideas that you have, continue to share them with us through the survey, through your experiences today, through the breakouts after this, because that will only help us get better and more inclusive in how we present our days. There's so many great ideas that come out this morning, so that's really good. But we want to invite our next, we have 3 presenters coming up next to talk about 3 different types of accommodations you can get on our campus. One of those being our employee, if you're an employee getting not 3 types, but 3 categories of accommodations. 1, employee accommodations. 2 would be student accommodations. And the 3rd is Title IX accommodations, because we often don't think about that as a space that we need accommodations for, either for employees or students. So I'd like to welcome our presenters up, and Melissa Danner is going to kick us off with our employee start.
Hello, I'm short. Can you hear me? No. So we have this working now, I assume. I'm Melissa Danner, the interim HR director. I believe that most of you know who I am, but I better introduce myself. So I'm just going to talk about employee accommodations. Sorry, it's been a morning. So when I'm talking about employee accommodations, I'm generally today talking about ADA accommodations. ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is a federal civil rights law that protects people with disabilities from discrimination in employment under Title I, among other areas. So there are employment protections that basically protect you against adverse experiences with an employer in terms of hiring, so hiring, job training, and firing. I'm not talking about that today. My focus is going to be on the reasonable accommodations, okay? So the ADA states that employers must provide reasonable accommodation to qualified applicants or employees with disabilities. And the accommodations can be a variety of different things. So the question is, what is a reasonable accommodation? A reasonable accommodation is something that we do as an employer to allow you to do the essential functions of your job, okay? So it's a modification or adjustment to the job or the work environment that allow an individual with a disability to have equal opportunity to successfully perform the essential functions of their job to the same extent as people without disabilities. So that is the definition of it. So it requires that we offer accommodations to people who are applying for jobs, that we make the hiring, the application and hiring process accessible, and that also that we have accommodations that enable you to do your job, and that we make it possible for employees with disabilities to enjoy the equal benefits and privileges of your employment. I'm really bad at this, managing a PowerPoint and talking, so I apologize. So reasonable accommodations can be a lot of different things. They look like they take on a lot of different looks, okay? So it's something that manages or that helps you manage and complete your work without disrupting the work of the organization or creating an undue hardship for the employer, all right? So we might have an employee who comes in and says, well, I have a disability and I need to work from home every day. Well, when their job is person-facing, in person, if you're working the front desk and greeting our students, that is not a job that we can use, that is a reasonable accommodation, because the essential functions of your job would require you to be at the desk to greet students, all right? So reasonable accommodations are something that are determined through an interactive process between the employer and the employee. So if you need a reasonable accommodation, you come to us and you say, hey, I've got a disability, I need an accommodation, here's an idea that I have for an accommodation. And we might say, hey, great, we can do that. That's an easy thing. We'll certainly give you that accommodation. And then we put it in writing, and then you have that accommodation guaranteed to you. Sometimes the accommodation you come to us with, like working from home when you are somebody who is a greeter at the front desk, we're gonna say, that's not gonna work. We can't do that. That is an undue hardship on the employer because the essential functions of your job require you to be here. So what else can we do as the employer to provide you accommodations that will help you manage your disability and your job that still allow you to meet the needs of us as your employer, okay? So, you know, I'm not gonna go through, there are hundreds of disabilities and there are hundreds of accommodations that we could work through. They might include things like assistive technology, like screen readers or live captioning, hearing aid-enabled headsets, alternative equipment, providing written instructions instead of or in addition to verbal instructions. So if you have a hard time listening and processing, then you might need something in writing in addition to or instead of listening to somebody. And that's why we have slides in addition to you listening to me here. Alternative or flexible work schedules, a modified break schedule. You might need extra breaks during the day because you have fibromyalgia and you need to get up and move around often. And so that would be something that could be an accommodation. Modification of your work location. If you are in a building that has a lot of scents or aromas and you have a sensitivity to that or an allergy to something, then it might be something like, well, we're gonna have you work in this other building instead, right? So there are a lot of different ways that we can help you work through those issues. So what that means is we'll ask you a lot of questions once you come to us with a request. Like, what are the limitations that you're experiencing? How do they affect your job performance? What specific job tasks are problematic? Like, what specific things can you not do or are you having trouble doing, right? And then what accommodations might be available? Are they reasonable? Do they help you do your job? Are they not disruptive to the business? So there's a lot of ways that we would talk through this. So it's not a one and done thing, all right? And so I just want everybody to know that if you come to us with a request, it's not going to be a, you give us your request, we approve it or we deny it. It would be a, you give us your request, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to come up with some options. Or sometimes we don't need to ask a lot of questions. We can say, well, we're going to go ahead and give you what you're asking for. We're going to modify it just a little bit, right? Because we'll still give you what you think you need, what you think will work best for your disability. And then we're also going to make it reasonable and work for us. So, let's see. I was supposed to be real short with this, and I'm getting long-winded. So, how do you get an accommodation? So the first thing I suggest is if you're comfortable with it, start with your supervisor. You might not need an official formal accommodation. It might be something like, hey, I am having a hard time processing the things that we are talking about in our one-on-one meetings. I'm leaving those meetings, I'm not really remembering because I'm a little stressed out in those meetings or because I have a hard time just following along. So would you be able to, at the end of our meetings, just send me a summary of what we talked about and what the action items were, okay? Any reasonable supervisor should be able to do that, right? So you can start with that. If you are not comfortable talking to your supervisor, that's okay. I encourage it, but it's okay if you're not. If you don't want to disclose anything, and if you're talking to your supervisor, you don't have to disclose a disability. You can just say, hey, I'm having trouble doing this. I think that there's an easy way we could solve that. Here's my idea, okay? You don't have to turn that into, hey, I have a disability, and so I'd like you to accommodate it, and here's how I want you to accommodate it. It doesn't have to be that formal of a conversation, all right? If you either can't talk to your supervisor or not comfortable with it, or the accommodation is going to be something that needs to be a little bit more formalized, then you would want to submit an employee. You guys. Then you're going to submit an employee accommodations request form to me. So I am the campus ADA coordinator for employees. I've also got one of my team members, Marquise, who is also helping with some of those ADA accommodation requests because I just can't do it all every day, unfortunately. So you can find this form and more information on the HR SharePoint site under the topics it's really small there, but there's a blue box on the page that says Americans with Disabilities Act. And also, again, a really small picture, but this kind of just shows you what the page looks like. And the page has information about the ADA and has contact information, some ADA resources. It links you to the federal legislation. It links you to the state information and some of the state of Minnesota policies and procedures. And then it's got a link to all of the forms that can be downloaded and completed and submitted to me, and also my contact information. So. I'm not going to take questions now because we have a very short amount of time. I've already taken way more time than I was supposed to. But we are going to have this afternoon a session where it's going to be a drop-in session where you're going to be able to come in if you have questions about accommodations, about ADA. You can go ahead and do that. I will be there, and my other fellow presenters will also be there answering questions about their particular areas. So Jessica, I think, is next. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Okay, I have notes because I am not a presenter, so please bear with me. So my name is Jessica Frazier. I'm the Director of Access Services. Oh, shoot. And our office is also supported by Eliana Knudsen, who is our accommodation specialist. So today we're going to just talk a little bit about the accommodation process for our students and what that looks like in the classroom setting. So what we do, Access Services helps continue to work towards ensuring that NHCC is accessible for our students some of our faculty members, and then also community members. We support students with learning, psychological, and invisible documented disabilities by providing reasonable accommodations. Our role is to ensure that there is equal access to course material from your classes on D2L for our students. Some of the reasonable accommodations that we put in place are, in the classroom, we can ask for you to provide a note taker for our students. We also have demonstrated how to use OneNote, which is an option, a Microsoft option tool. We also can help provide textbooks in an alternative format, and that could be a PDF, so they can use a screen reader. That could also be an audio version of it or a Braille version. We've provided ASL interpreters or CART services, and we ensure that there is ADA furniture in the classroom settings. Another accommodation that we've added a little bit more often is also this 1 to 3 day extension on assignments as needed when it is related to the student's disability. Some of the common testing accommodations could be the extended testing time. This could be 1.5 or 2 times testing. A low distraction testing environment for our students. So they would make an appointment through Register Blast in the testing center. So it is a low distraction testing area. Students could have audio versions of the test provided to them. All of these accommodations, along with the description, are found on the NHCC SharePoint page, Access Services page. And so you can always link there. It is also linked into their accommodation letter that they forward to you as instructors. Yes. Yes, so CART services is like real-time captioning. So how do students get accommodations? Students would fill out the application on our website. At the same time, they are submitting reasonable documentation that is appropriate to their disability. So this could be an IEP or a 504 from high school. It could be a psych evaluation or a letter from their provider stating a diagnosis. After I've had time to review the documentation, the student then does an intake meeting with myself, and we review the documentation and talk about how their disability impacts them in the classroom setting and also in the testing setting. We come up with reasonable accommodations that we can put in place, and we collaborate on that. This is also a time that I talk about TRIO, we talk about tutoring services, our care center, and we also talk about our academic weekly support group that Access Services and the Care Center offers. Students then share their accommodation letter with their instructors. Students get a new accommodation notice every semester after they register for their classes, so they do not need to come and re-meet with Access Services. Some important things to know is accommodations are not retroactive. So we suggest that the students share their letter with the student or with the instructors the first week of classes. We encourage students to have conversations with their instructors to see what that accommodation looks like in the classroom. Access Services does not provide alternative format for textbooks or notes to students who are not registered with Access Services. We've also support students in conversations with their instructors if they need help because of that barrier. Sometimes something was mentioned like that power dynamic. So we do come and help support our students with having those really difficult conversations. So what can you do? Our paralegal department has done an amazing job at this already, but they've implemented a universal design for learning with all of their courses because of the DOC when they're teaching. So you can look at your course material and try to implement a universal design approach, being flexible with different modalities that you're teaching your material, but also being flexible with how a student presents their knowledge to you. So if your goal is to know that they know the material and they don't feel comfortable writing a paper, have them do a presentation. as long as they're getting to you that they know the material, that's the end goal. I mean, tests are still okay to do, like I get that. Accessible textbooks. I know many instructors put their textbook in D2L. Make sure that you have worked with the publisher, that the text aid or the read speaker is turned on. Make sure that other features are turned on. So like students can highlight, students can like make note cards. All the features that publishers have, make sure those are turned on for our students. Provide feedback on a regular basis. This allows our students to know where they stand in the course. It takes a lot of anxiety away from where they're standing, and it can help them know if they need to do things differently. Provide a flexible learning space. So have the students be able to ask questions, collaborate with their peers, or also work on their independently if they need to. Creating a routine. So creating weekly discussion questions or creating weekly routines for our students. This helps them know what the expectation is, and then it allows them to know when due dates are, making it very clear what the expectation is. Make sure that your documents that you are posted in D2L are tagged for our students who navigate with screen readers. Post your transcript to your lectures or any podcasts that you post on D2L. Make sure that your videos are closed captioned before you're posting them to D2L. And you can reach out to Access Services for support, or you can reach out to the care team, the STAR team. Any questions? Just kidding. Just kidding, no questions. We're gonna do that afterwards.
I'm so nervous. So, English is my second language, so if you miss anything, sorry. I'm not used to being in a room with so many people. I'm usually in a little room. You know, me screaming like kids. No, I don't scream like them, but as you see, we don't be talking about Title IX today. Well, what is Title IX? What is the purpose of Title IX? Well, as it states on there, it says, no person in the United States shall be, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participating in or be denied, okay, to be subject to discrimination on an education program and activity receiving federal and financial assistance. What are some of the areas of compliance? Admission, recruitment, grievance, training, employment, athletics, pregnant and parenting. Usually when people hear about Title IX, the first thing they think about is, athletics, right? Yeah, not anymore. Pregnant and parenting students. Pregnancy, childbirth, lactation, miscarriage, abortion, related conditions, including recovery. Additional consideration. Child, be mindful of your words. Be gender inclusive. Father versus co-parenting or non-birth parents. Mothering room versus lactation. We have both of them, actually. We have motherings and also we have lactation. Birth complication, care of newborns, foster adopted parents, parents who have surrogate. What are some of the adjustments to ensure a pregnant student's access its educational program when necessary? Schools might take adjustments to the regular program that are reasonable and responsive to students' temporary and pregnant status. That do not require a school to provide same special service to pregnant students that it provides to students with temporary medical conditions. Well, I didn't make it easy for myself, right? Thank you. Reasonable modifications, Title IX require a school to make reasonable modifications to policies and practice or procedures as necessary to prevent sex discriminations and ensure equal access to recipient education program or activities. Each reasonable modification must be based on the student's individual needs. So, everybody's circumstances are different. In determining what modifications are required, the institution must consult with the student, not just, assume. The student has discretion to accept or decline reasonable modification. If they say, hey, I don't want it, make sure you consult them before providing whatever it is. Supporting measure for pregnant students, childbirth, resulting medical status or conditions, excessive absence. I usually get in trouble with this one. If a student take few time off, and sometimes we get the FN, right? If you don't hear about from them and stuff. But we just had one recently where one of our advisors trying to work with me to get the student back into a class. Sorry, somebody calling me, not me. So excessive absence allowed to make up assignments and assessments, allow for additional time for temporary medical conditions. Okay, allow for pregnant and parenting students to have leave of absence if in good standing or return in good standing. So this part too also usually advisings and let's say the students is below 67%, right? And they cannot be like expelled or kicked out. Okay. Early registration, this is pretty new, and we are still fighting with it, but you have to allow the students to have early registration if they are pregnant and parenting students. Write the absence and leaves. Medically necessary must be excused. Regardless of professors or instructor policy, it's not me. This is Title IX. So regardless of the instructor policies or procedures, they have to be excused. Student must not be penalized. Opportunity to make up work or miss credit, exam, regular deadline, participations, attendance, and points. Required documentations, submission, only if required for other medical conditions. While on leave, work may not be completed, you have to devote time for the student to make up that work. What are some of the examples for possible title modification? Breaks, intermittent absence, access to online education, changes in school schedules, extension of time, allowing students to sit or stand, carry out or keep water nearby. Some classes might not allow water, so changes in physical appearance, space applies. For example, access to a larger desk. I think my colleagues went over that. Protection for parent students and parenting students shall not be required to take a leave or withdraw from classes. Reasonable modifications and adjustment for pregnant students, as those provide for temporary medical conditions or related to health and safety of a student and unborn child. Lactation space. The institution must ensure that a student can have access to a lactation space, which might be a space other than a bathroom. I think we have 2 of them on campus. We have one in the science and one in the campus center. It has to be clean. shield from view, free from intrusion from others, may be used by a student for expressing breast milk or breastfeeding as needed. Well, I went for the pass, right? I have 5 minutes and I did it in 7, so that's my contact. You can take a picture of it or reach out to me. Please, no question.
Hey y'all, I realized I forgot to introduce myself. Most of you probably know me, but I'm Kelly Lundquist and I teach in the English department. So we are about to take a little break, heading into some breakout rooms. Lindsay and I toyed around with several ways to split us up into groups, 4 groups. And so forgive me if I've miscounted the chairs, but essentially if you're on that side, up until the 7th chair in the aisle, does that make sense? You're group 1. So those of you basically in this swath right here are group 1. Thank you. Yes, exactly. On this side right here, you're group 2. Same principle here. The 7th chair, basically where Elton is, split between Elton and Jessica, essentially here. And you're gonna go down this way, you're group 3, and then finally group 4, Lindsay's side over here. Okay. And so what you'll do, we're going to take, let's say we'll get to the room by 11:20 and start then, just to allow a little stretch break, coffee refills, hot chocolate, what have you. Those in group 1 are going to meet with Lindsay and Justice in CBT 211, so that's upstairs. Those in group 2 will meet with me and Dina Colmer, who I think I saw just down there a second ago. We're going to be in the next door in CBT 210, also upstairs. David Mantini and Amy Nevsker Banks will be meeting in CBT 169, so that's group 3, that's y'all. And then finally group 4 will be meeting with Deanna Forsman and Shauna Paul in CBT 174. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to come see one of us who's on the Duty Day committee. Otherwise, have a nice break and enjoy your session.
For anyone streaming in CBT 211, please just count yourselves off into 4 and split up into the rooms. Thank you, streaming folks.